Excited. Okay, a lot to get into.
Mina's been here for...
She has, every day. Yeah, well, Mina and me are working. I don't know about you, but you're working today, so we're putting you to work. Bears, a lot to talk about this offseason if you're a Bears fan. The defensive losses, well documented, right? 19 of their 23 interceptions last year came from players no longer on the team. DJ Moore was traded to Buffalo. Drew Dahlman retired, but Kobe Bryant headlines the key additions. In addition to those moves, Caleb Williams talked about the difference for him in year 2 under Ben Johnson.
It's a hell of a lot more fun for me than it was last year, just because it was, I was sent to Coach Stews. It's like, dude, I felt like I was drowning, trying to breathe, or stay alive and wait for a boat to come around. Last year, now this year, it's like I said earlier, it's being able to start where we finished last year, play calls and words and verbiage, and speak the same language. And now it's been able to grow more from an earlier stage than maybe doing it, maybe a little bit earlier in the season or halfway through the season, and speaking on things that really helps throughout the year and later in the year. And so that's the advantage.
It's one of my favorite sound bites of the entire offseason. Our Bears reporter Courtney Cronin joining us now, and she took a deep dive on Johnson's impact. Courtney, how has the whole team adapted to Ben Johnson's style in year 2?
Laura, defensive end Montez Sweat's a man of very few words. So when he was asked about the success that the Bears experienced last year and what he attributed that to, he turned the answer into a who. Very simple, one word, Ben. And he was talking about the impact that Ben Johnson had on creating championship caliber habits within this team. And quite frankly, he left no bones about it. He said he worked the bleep out of us. If it wasn't about winning, that it was non-existent. And that started very early in the process. It started at training camp last year. Like Caleb Williams was talking about there, he was not immune to that level of criticism, being called out in front of the team, being worked to the absolute bone in training camp, where there were a lot of days where it felt like bad day after bad day, things weren't getting better. And that lifeboat he talked about, wondering where it was going to come, it came in the form of some really hard work and a lot of criticism that ended up getting Caleb Williams to a point where he knew the offense, where he felt like he was in command of the offense, and things started to click after going through a lot of really tough days early on. And it wasn't just Williams getting on the Ben Johnson method to the madness, so to speak. It was the coaches too. I talked with offensive coordinator Press Taylor, who said at this time last year, they were just trying to teach quarterbacks how to hold the ball and where to align, that they weren't even able to get into the more complex parts of this offense because they were learning the Detroit system. There was only Ben Johnson, Antoine Randall, and JT Barrett who had come with Johnson from Detroit. So the coaches, at the same time that the players were learning this, they were learning how to coach it. So now going into year 2, this is very firmly Ben Johnson's team, from the way that the roster is constructed to the way that these practices are expected to go in the second go around at training camp. And I think that that's where you're going to see the biggest impact coming up here in a couple of weeks. Like Caleb Williams was mentioning, they should be able to get off to a faster start because the verbiage, the plays, they all have proof of concept that these things work, and they've already run a big portion of these. So whereas when they get to training camp at Hallis Hall at the end of July, it's not going to be that they're starting over from scratch. They've already been through this. They know what's expected of them, and they know what Johnson's expectation is going to be, which is even more hard work in year 2.
All right, thanks so much to Courtney. Just excellent information there. And Dan, what do you want to see from this Bears team entering year 2 of the Ben Johnson era, with the context that Courtney's provided about how things could be different?
Put your stamp on this version of Ben Johnson's offense. And listening to Courtney, and she continues to talk about the players learning the coaches, absolutely. I also think we saw examples of the coaches learning the players last year. Caleb Williams is a very different style of quarterback than Jared Goff. And so figuring out this Ben Johnson offense, how are the players not only learning the coaches, but the coaches learning the player? I think the second thing is just playing with the desperation that they did when they had to last year earlier in games. We've talked about how the heroic comebacks in the fourth quarter magic and Iceman. Can they get Caleb in this offense to play that way in the first quarter of football games rather than just when they have to? I think the last part is Loveland became the go-to guy for this offense as the season went on. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. DJ Moore no longer there. Colston Loveland's going to be, I think, the pass game guy that they run their offense through. who's going to be the second person?
Yeah.
Is it going to be Rome Odunze? Is it going to be Xavion Williams? Is it going to be Luther Burden III? So really that really dynamic second pass catching option is going to have to step forward in 2026.
Yeah, I loved your point, Dan, about the coaches starting learning the players, because I don't think it's a coincidence that the Bears offense, the passing attack, looked better, its best at the end of the year. That Loveland broke out, the way they used him in that postseason run was so impressive. These are really young players. We talk so much about Caleb Williams year 2, but most of the skill players are very young too, and I think we're going to see them all build on that. I'm extremely optimistic about this offense. I think Ben Johnson now has demonstrated in 2 different spots. He's one of the best play callers in football. But if I have one area of concern, and I was thinking about this looking at the changes you showed earlier, Laura, it is the offensive line, because as much as we talk about these fun young skill players and as exciting as the quarterback is, the offensive line was, I thought, the identity of this offense, really, and they were the best zone blocking offensive line in football. Second most yards before contact, by the way, behind only Buffalo. And some of that has to do with Johnson and what he does with motion and personnel grouping to create favorable angles in space. But they lost their center, Drew Dahlman. In comes Bradbury. And then Ozzie Trapillo played really well for them at left tackle. Braxton Jones has played left tackle for them before. But, that is a pretty significant change in continuity from what we saw last year. And I do think if there's one area where I'm a little bit worried, it would be that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Bradbury replacing Dahlman, he's a good player.
Yeah.
Dahlman controlled so much of the line of scrimmage. And I'm not just talking about 3rd down and 7 pass protections. It's 1st down, the run game, and that zone scheme that Mina's talking about. We're going to the right. Who's going where? When's the double team going from the defensive tackle to the linebacker? The communication that it takes. So how much of that does Caleb take on his own shoulders to kind of make the points of who's going to what defender, but also how that unit comes together when it comes to the verbal and nonverbal stuff in the run game that Drew Dahlman handled so much of.
That's a great point. I mean, it feels like Caleb is more equipped to take on a little bit more of that, but it's easier said than done when you get out there and you're actually having to go up against a D-line. And as we count down to training camp here on NFL Live, Adam Schefter is bringing us his take on some of the biggest storylines of this NFL offseason.